Welcome to Wellsprings of Faith. My name is Father Jurgen Liias. I'm a Roman Catholic priest and the host of this program, Wellsprings of Faith, which looks at religious faith, the journey of faith in a person's life, and what that faith has produced in the life of the world and the life of our own community. It's good to welcome back. It seems these days I'm bumping into old friends and old acquaintances and people we've actually had on this show. We've been having the show almost 25 years, so some go quite a ways back. But I welcome back today Kent Kusel, who is has worked in the ministry of particularly focusing on Christ in the marketplace and how people reflect their faith where they work. That's been a special, wonderful part of his ministry. And at this point, he's getting a doctorate in that area and is reflecting on some new things that he wants to do. So welcome.
Well, thank you.
Good to have you here.
Great to be here.
Good to welcome back. Usually the format of the show is a person giving their own witness, as we would say, in kind of evangelical Christian circles. It's been so long since we've had you, I've forgotten your witness, so I suspect no one else remembers it, even if they watch this show faithfully. But anyway, St. Paul, the story of Paul's conversion is 3 times in the New Testament, so there's nothing wrong with repeating one story. So tell us a little bit your own faith journey as a Christian, how you came to know the Lord.
Sure. Well, I would describe big picture my faith journey to be kind of a 3-phase process for me. It started with my head, it moved to my heart, and eventually moved into my hands. And let me just explain what I mean by that.
All right, yeah.
So I grew up in a home where we went to church every week, and so I, early on in life, would call myself a Christian. I did all the proper stuff in Sunday school. I think intellectually I knew what it meant to.
Was there any particular brand of Christianity?
No, it was not. It was a non-denominational evangelical church.
Okay.
And my family is very active in the church, and so I became active as well. And so I certainly knew.
It was the air you breathed from the time you were young.
True. And I was head of the youth group and did things in high school and so forth. But it was just headspace. I mean, intellectually I knew what it meant to be a Christian. But I was really committed early on in my life that I wanted to be a successful business person. My father was a CEO of a company. He bought a broken company before I was born and built it into quite a big corporation. And like father, like son, I knew at a very early age that my destiny was to be a business owner, a business leader like my father.
Ah.
So when I went off to college, I was, calling myself a card-carrying Christian, but you would not know from the lifestyle I lived that that was indeed where my heart was.
Yeah.
And so I went off to school and got prepared for the business world. That just means I needed to get a degree in business, which I did, and I joined the commercial real estate field. I figured that was the best way to make a lot of money, a best way to accelerate my career and get all the things that I thought would be important for my life. And sure enough, by the time I was 30, I had done, in the world's eyes, very well. I had, bought a home. I lived in Boca Raton, Florida. I was living a good life.
Yeah.
But something was definitely wrong in my heart.
Yeah.
Billy Graham came to town, Fort Lauderdale, where I was living at the time, and I went to a Billy Graham crusade. And the way he described the gospel, that I think that was the conversion for me. That it went from my head
to your heart.
To my heart.
Wow.
And they insisted that when you finished the event that you would get connected with the church.
Yeah.
So I got connected with the church, and the pastor was a former businessman.
Ah.
And so
that sounds like God's providence.
It was, indeed.
Yeah.
So suddenly he was preaching in ways and using stories and so forth that really, really connected with me. So I was really excited about my new faith, and I certainly cleaned up my life a little bit. Chose some different friends, but I continued pursuing my business career. No one ever told me that there was a way to live out my faith in the marketplace, so I didn't. I was like
two different spheres, the secular and the religious.
Yes, I was like the Monday morning atheist. On Sunday when I went to church, on Tuesday night I went to small group. When I volunteered for things at the church, I was a Christian.
Yeah.
And Monday morning, I was off to business. And it's not because I wanted to be that way, I didn't know any better.
No one, yeah.
And so for many years, it was still, that nagging feeling I had at 30 was still with me. And then I ended up taking a new corporate job in Boston. And this time I was in my early 40s, and ended up going to Park Street Church. And lo and behold, after the church service, they had this class called Marketplace Ministry.
Ah.
And I show up, and here's a bunch of business guys like me, and they were talking about things that were important to me, but instead of using the Harvard Business School books that I would use, they were using the Bible. I thought, you got to be kidding me. The Bible speaks to this? And at that time, one of my jobs in corporate America was doing some training, and so some of the people at Park Street asked if I'd like to teach some of this, and I was just dumbfounded that they would even allow someone like me to teach. And they said, don't worry, we'll be here to help you, and we'll correct you when we need to. And so when I started teaching what the Bible had to say about work, suddenly it realized, man.
What were you drawing on to do that teaching? I mean, besides you were using the Bible, but was it?
Well, at that time there was this Bible edition that was that had some notes in it.
The Marketplace
for the Marketplace.
Bible?
It was a Marketplace Bible, and one of the local guys here, Pete Hammond from InterVarsity, had written a bunch of notes in it, sold it to Tom Nelson, and they released that Bible.
So that was.
And that was very helpful. Suddenly I could go to some of my favorite passages and see the connection between the two, and that would just be the launching pad to go deeper.
It is interesting. I mean, I've been a priest all my life, so I know in one sense I know nothing about the marketplace. But although obviously I hope my ministry has affected people who do live and work in the marketplace. But it is interesting scripturally, if you took all the topics in the Bible and you categorize them, the number one topic, and at least in the moral category, would be money. Economics, wealth, the rich, the poor, and all kinds of stories, laws in the Old Testament, parables in the New Testament about what we would call broadly economics. So it's not an irrelevant, book.
Well, I
figuring out how to apply that, these spiritual principles to the reality of the marketplace. But anyway, that's what did that work?
I think that where the disconnect is in many cases is that a lot of people get kind of their foundations of their faith, through church and through weekly homilies and sermons.
Right.
And, most pastors have not spent time in the traditional marketplace, so it's not natural for them to suddenly come up with all these wonderful marketplace applications.
Right.
And so I guess to just assume that maybe it doesn't have much to say about it. So, I don't live that way.
Yeah.
And so I don't think it's intentional. Anybody ever wanted to not have those truths. They just, were never trained for it. And so I'm hoping that over time the seminaries will do a better job of preparing people for that segment. I don't think there's a more common demographic within the pews of a church than people who work.
Yeah.
So as a result of all this, I realized I'd been in the wrong field for the wrong reasons for a long time.
What made you think that? Because obviously working itself isn't necessarily the wrong field.
Oh, it was not the wrong field, but I realized that my definition of success.
Yeah. Oh, I see.
My definition of success was, financial success, positioning, power, ability to provide, the things I want in life. And there's nothing wrong to having those things.
Yeah.
But because they were kind of like my highest priority, and I realize now as a little bit more informed Christian in the marketplace, that God's definition of success is how do we glorify Him?
Yeah.
And I'm thinking, I'm not doing that. I'm glorifying Kent, not glorifying God. And I was kind of ashamed of myself that I'd spent all these, at that time it was over 20 years.
Yeah.
That, and I read this book called Halftime that really impacted me. It was a businessman who went through a life-changing experience as a Christian, realized that he had spent most of his life as a Monday morning atheist. He didn't really know how to live out his faith in life. And he lost his son in his early 20s. His son died in a major accident. It really brought him back to his knees. He said, I came to this conclusion that I've been doing the wrong thing for the wrong reasons for a long time. But he became convinced that, like a football game, he could go into halftime. And in halftime, you go back to the locker room, and you go back and look at where you've been, and you say, you know what, I still have the quarter or two left, right?
Yeah.
In this case, 2 quarters. And he said, you know, no matter how old or young you are, if you get to this place, just realize there's another quarter left,
Yeah.
and it could be the best quarter of your life. So that book really resonated with me. Matter of fact, I called the author, and I said to him, you need to hire me. He said, why is that? I said, there's so many people that are like this, including myself here in Boston. I could help you find them. And he said, well, I'm not really ready for that now. And at that time is when I made my first major transition from the corporate world into the marketplace ministry world. Because one of the members of Park Street Church had started a ministry called Marketplace Network, and his focus was helping men and women learn how to integrate their faith and work.
Yeah.
And he had just died. And 3 of the Park Street Church members were on his board. And I guess out of desperation, they hired me because I had been leading the marketplace ministry at Park Street Church.
Right.
And somehow they felt that was good enough to lead this national ministry, Marketplace Network. So that began a whole new chapter for me. And I spent the next...
And I think that's when we crossed paths.
That's right.
And
That's
certainly
right.
the first time you came on was not too long after you began that work. So go ahead. So
I spent the next several years, you know, pretending I was an expert in a subject that I was not. And we spent a lot of time as a ministry going to churches and talking to the pastors and the church leaders, you know, thinking that the best distribution channel in the Christian world is the church.
yeah,
So we could somehow get to the church and help equip and prepare them to equip their people at work, that would be the answer. And so I thought, you know, early on that maybe the pastors would be the catalyst.
yeah,
But after about 5 years of doing this, I realized the catalyst was the workers who we had ministered to that experienced a life change. They would just naturally go back to their church and want to do what happened with
Yeah.
Marketplace Network, not because it had our name on it or anything to do with us.
Right.
They just brought it back to the church. I didn't like that because it just meant that one person at a time was going to go through this experience. It could take a lifetime, and it does take a lifetime.
Yeah.
And I could never find a shortcut. So I really enjoyed, you know, the pleasure of being in a not-for-profit world. I had my offices at Park Street Church. They gave me office space down there, and so I was right in the middle of the marketplace. We did all kinds of events and invited many prominent business leaders who are Christians as
Yeah.
speakers, just to reflect how do I live out my faith.
Now, I know it's obviously that is a rich, rich topic, and I don't expect you to answer it in 5 minutes, but I'm going to ask you, I mean, if you think about your own life, you were, as you said, you were Sunday Christian and a Monday morning atheist. What does a Monday morning Christian look like? I mean, what would be some of the distinctive things that would be manifested in the life of a person a Christian who's kind of got a hold of the vision you're talking about, really applying your faith and your work?
Well, the first thing is a very common and important principle from the Bible.
Yeah.
Matter of fact, Jesus called it the greatest commandment. The greatest commandment said that, you know, first we should love God with all of our heart and all of our soul, and then second, we should love our neighbors, we love ourselves. So now take that in the context of work. So if I'm supposed to love God and glorify Him in everything I do, what would Jesus say a job should look like? What would I do to conduct myself in the workplace in a way that would honor and glorify Jesus? Now that's a very big topic, and so the natural first thing that comes to mind is some ethical standards, some character standards that the Bible's chock full of them.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, for most of us, we've never really thought about those characters in the context of our work. So a very simple first step is to start thinking about, you know, the idea of, you know, what would Christ do in the marketplace? But the second part, to love my neighbor as I love myself, you ask yourself, who is my neighbor? Now, the work world that I've lived in, I don't recall loving so much on many people in my workplace. I wasn't loving on my fellow employees. I wasn't loving on my customers. I wasn't loving on my vendors. I just that just wasn't what I'm supposed to do, because
Yeah.
that's not what the business community does around the world. But if you take the answer that Jesus gave, who my neighbor is, he takes us through the Good Samaritan. And here, somebody who was definitely in a hurting place, got robbed, beaten, and sitting on the side of the road, and a priest and a Levite and a Samaritan, all three passed this guy, and two of them walked right by him. The third one stopped and helped him, picked him up and took him to the inn, left some cash to take care of his needs. I mean, really went out of his way.
Yeah.
And Jesus, asked, this Pharisee, well, which one of those was the neighbor? And they said, I guess all three of them. The fact is that anybody we run across in the marketplace is our neighbor.
Yeah.
So when you look in the context of who my neighbor is, and you realize, man, I got to love on my employees, my fellow employees, and if you're a boss or an executive, I mean, you have a lot of responsibility for a lot of people. I have to love on my customers. I know when I was in the commercial real estate field and selling real estate, all I wanted from my customers was the transaction. Please, buy this, buy that. So the first principle that's just rich is learning how to live out the Great Commandment.
Summary of the laws.
That's right. And the second thing, which is something that people just don't even want to think about very often, unfortunately, in the marketplace, is the Great Commission. So the Great Commission wasn't the Great Suggestion. I mean, the Great Commission was a commandment. He told us to go out and not only tell people about Christ, but to tell people how you live like Christ. And so what I have found is that many people in the marketplace are very intimidated by the idea about sharing their faith. And the reason why many of them are intimidated about sharing their faith is it seems that more than most don't really have a great foundation. They haven't done anything beyond what they picked up on Sunday mornings or whenever they go to church. And so I believe that, that part of the Great Commission is the responsibility that we have of discipling other people. And so I was part of a couple of ministries after Marketplace Network that our focal point as a ministry was discipling people. What does that mean? That means you spend time one-on-one with another man. You go through the basic 10 minutes of the faith, and it's not easy. I mean, it's not easy in the sense that it takes a lot of time. It takes a lot of sacrifice. And what you're doing is you're preparing that person not only to get their own foundation right, but you're preparing them to pass it on, to multiply that. That was Jesus' plan. He took his 12 disciples, he trained them, they went out and taught 12 more, and it just kept multiplying. And that's the plan. There is no plan B. That's plan A, and there is no plan B. And so when you realize what a joy it is to be able to do that, and to realize I don't need to go across the world to some international mission field to find people who don't know Christ, they're sitting right next to me in the marketplace. I have the most fertile, opportunity out there, and because people don't really care about what you know until they know that you care. So now, if you go back to the greatest commandment, you start loving on people at work. They're not used to that. Is this guy real? I mean, I just can't believe some of the things that he does to care for people, and that really attracts people's attention. That sets the stage for the Great Commission. So those are two of the principles. And one other I try to make it as uncomplicated as I can for people. If you try to give them a laundry list of the 10 Commandments and then 10 more, that's more than they can bear. So I tend to focus on three principles: the greatest commandment, the Great Commission, and then one that is the least talked about out there, which is commonly referred to as the cultural mandate, the cultural commission. And it comes from Genesis 1 and Genesis 2, where after God created man and all the heavens and all the earth and all the things that are in this world, he created man. And he said, man, your job is to recreate yourselves and to subdue the world. And so the first example we have, the first job of Scripture we have, was Adam and Eve. And what were they given? They've given the first job in the garden, right? And their job was to cultivate the garden, make the best of it. And that set the stage and set the example for what God intends for every worker. Whatever resources we have available to us, how do we cultivate that, rearrange it in a way that brings honor and glory to God and brings help to others? And when I started thinking about that concept in my commercial real estate field, it radically changed the way that I think of things. I'll just give you an example here. I used to sell land, big parcels of land. And I lived in Florida for 20 years doing that. And that was a great place to sell land because
lots of land, especially those days.
At that time, you're right. In the 80s, in the 90s, there was lots of vacant land. And so, also when you sell land as a real estate broker, you get paid a percentage of the price of the land. And some of those big parcels of land commanded a lot of money. So you can make huge commissions, right? Big paydays.
Yeah.
And so I was very motivated by getting those big paydays and selling those big lands. And then when I started realizing that God cared the way that I handled the real estate, I got an assignment to sell this 27-acre parcel of land that was perfect for a shopping center. I thought, okay, now I'm a Christian. How am I supposed to view this real estate deal now as a differently? Before all I wanted was commission to make the best buyer come and pay me the highest price, and everybody's happy. And I said, no, wait a minute. What goes on this piece of real estate, it's going to dramatically impact the people that live within a 3-mile ring of this location. Now you could put in anything you want in that retail center, but I have a chance to help determine the quality of that retail center, how much parking is going to be available there. You know how painful it is to go into a nice shopping center and can't park, right?
Yeah.
To go into a shopping center that has some retailer establishments that you would not want to send your children to. So what would a great retail property look like? And I thought, well, this place needs a great grocery store. It needs a great pharmacy. It needs a place to get your hair cut. It needs a place to get good family food. And so I just combed the earth. At that time, there was lots of people looking at it.
Yeah.
And I had a major influence on the owner of the property about who I think should be the right buyer for it. And we sold to someone who did a magnificent job. And I would not be at all surprised that when God returns and restores this earth, that shopping center may still be here. And the reason why it's going to still be here is because it is doing a great service for the local community. So I get a chance to be part of the second coming, so to speak, by taking the resources God makes available to all of us and do it in a way that helps make people flourish.
Yeah, one of the other sometimes misunderstandings is if you sort of follow these principles. Of course, the goal is not to get rich, but there are benefits. I mean, and including financial. I mean that these systems work, both, and as you said, that may still be there. Well, that's a long-term vision of something, where so often in our culture, in all kinds of levels, people have these very short, we got to make as much money as fast as we can, no matter what compromises we make in whatever the area that might be, rather than the sense of stewardship, integrity, charity, really guiding the kind of conversations, all the other conversations around the enterprise. So that's it. Well, that's helpful. You did a good job. I can see that that's a talk you can give to encourage people. So that was really your work.
For a while.
For a while, right? And then what other? How did that unfold into some other areas?
So I came to a place to realize that, in my view, corporate America was broken. What I thought was at one time maybe more of a Christian heritage workplace where people did things for the right reasons. It just has gone kind of off the rails, so to speak. So I thought, how could one man, Kent Kusel, have any impact on changing the business world? And I came to the conclusion, the best thing I could do is to help one business owner at a time see their work differently. So I became part of a ministry at CBMC, Christian Businessmen's Connection, where we specialized in taking presidents, CEOs, and business owners and spend significant time with them over time so they could see their work through the eyes of Christ. And so the general model, this is a very popular model, it's not specific to CBMC, there's several ministries that do this. They call them peer advisory groups, where they take 10 to 12 or 8 to 15 peers, not competitors, but peers, and they get them together for typically a day a month. And during that day a month, the facilitator, in this case has been me, spends a little bit of time teaching, trying to give them some principles about how to lead for Christ. We spend time praying for each other, which, by the way, is not a common theme for business owners to be praying for their business. And when someone else is praying for your business, some of the other men and women are doing that for you, it's like, wow, this is powerful. And then when you start experiencing these prayers being answered, because there's 10 or 12 people together every month, you're going to remember the things you prayed about.
Right. Sort of checking in.
You're getting evidence that God's listening to my prayers. And the third part of the day, besides a personal update from everybody, because sometimes those updates include some things that we need some help on, but every month one of the members gets to be on the hot seat. So if this is my month, then in advance I'd like you to tell us, Mr. Member or Mrs. Member, what's the biggest problem you're facing right now? How can we help you as fellow Christians to resolve this problem? So we take them through a process. They fill out a worksheet to say, my problem is this. It could be a business problem, it could be a marital problem, it could be a family problem, whatever problem is really on your mind. We help you prepare for it, so when you come to the meeting, everybody has seen this worksheet, so they know what you're going to come talk about. You've thought it through, so we don't waste a bunch of time at the meeting. And now we go through a process and help ask some tough questions to you. And after we all understand what the real problem is, we give our advice. And we always say that Scripture rules. So is there some Scripture that comes to mind that might help this person resolve this issue? And every time we do this, there are some really great suggestions. And then the person who hears those suggestions gets to decide, is one of those acceptable to me? And if they are, and most times there are, what can we hold you accountable to? So when we see it next month, we'll know that you've done something.
We're almost out of time, so I want to make sure we don't get cut off in the middle of this. So really, and then obviously I assume the implication is, like, as we influence the leader, hopefully they will influence the company. I mean, lead it in a direction that's
exactly
conforming
right.
to. I know we're actually got 1 minute left. I know you're taking a break from some of your work, going to school. Just in 30 seconds, what's the degree D-Min going to be in, and what do you envision doing with it on the other side of this educational hiatus?
So my doctorate of ministry is coming from Gordon Conwell Theological Seminary. And it's on workplace theology and leadership. And what really prompted me to do this is not only my interest in workplace theology, but I'm doing some work in Bangladesh. I'm part of a team that my church has sent over to Bangladesh, and we've opened up a business training center there.
Wow.
And so my thesis is around that business training center.
Wow, that's exciting.
So I figured it would help the church, it would help me, and it'd be fun getting a theology background. And so I finished all the coursework, and now I just have to finish the thesis.
And nurturing business in a obviously developing world.
That's right.
Thank you. That's a lot of rich stuff you're doing. When I bumped into you a few weeks ago at the men's breakfast, I said, gosh, he's not retired, is he? So I'm glad you could come in and catch up on blessings on all these enterprises.
Well, thank you.
And thank you. I hope you've enjoyed our conversation with Kent Kusel on particularly focusing on this wonderful calling to be a Christian in the world and to make a difference for Christ where God puts you. So I hope you've been helped by this program, and may God bless you and your work. Amen.